Across the vast expanse of the galaxy, life hums with an unseen rhythm, threads of energy weaving destiny, balance, and existence itself. Yet something stirs beyond that order. Something wrong. It is not born of life, nor shaped by the will of the Force. It is hunger made flesh, a devouring shadow that consumes not for power, but for the silence that follows. When such a thing enters the galaxy, even the Force shudders. The ritual chamber deep within the Emperor's private observatory on Coruscant had been prepared with meticulous care. Ancient Sith runes carved into obsidian floors pulsed with sickly green light as Darth Sidious channeled decades of accumulated dark side knowledge into a single, desperate working. Immortality. True immortality. Not the half-life of a Force ghost or the mechanical prison of Vader's suit. The Emperor sought to pierce the veil between realities, to touch the essence of undeath itself. The ritual succeeded beyond his wildest nightmares. Reality screamed. The fabric of space-time tore like wet parchment, and through the wound in the universe fell something that laughed, not with joy, but with the bone-deep amusement of a predator who had just discovered an entirely new hunting ground. The dimensional rift vomited crimson light across the chamber before collapsing with a thunderclap that shattered every window in the observatory. When the smoke cleared, Palpatine's red-robed guards found the chamber empty, save for a single figure standing in the center of the ritual circle. He was tall, inhumanly so, dressed in a red duster that seemed to drink the light around it. Crimson eyes glowed behind round orange-lensed glasses. His smile revealed teeth too sharp, too white, too many. Blood, impossibly fresh despite the vacuum of the dimensional crossing, dripped from his gloved hands onto the obsidian floor where it hissed and steamed. Well, Alucard said, his voice a velvet purr that echoed with the screams of millions. What fascinating new hell have I found myself in? The Emperor's royal guards moved with practiced precision, Force pikes leveled at the intruder. Alucard tilted his head, studying them with the curiosity of an entomologist examining a new species of insect. He could smell their fear beneath the helmets, could hear the racing of hearts that pumped warm blood through fragile veins. Delicious. One guard thrust his pike forward. Alucard didn't dodge. The energized blade punched through his chest with a crackle of electricity, emerging from his back in a spray of blood and tissue. The vampire looked down at the weapon impaling him, then up at the guard, his smile widening impossibly. "Rude," he said, and grabbed the pike's shaft. What happened next would be reported in hushed, horrified whispers throughout the Imperial Palace for weeks. The guard had time to scream once, before Alucard pulled him forward onto his outstretched hand. Fingers that should not have been strong enough to pierce combat armor tore through plastoid and flesh like tissue paper. The vampire's hand emerged from the guard's back, wrapped around his spine. Then Alucard drank. The other guards watched in frozen horror as their companion withered, desiccating in seconds as every drop of blood was drawn from his body through the gaping wound. The corpse hit the floor like a sack of kindling, and Alucard straightened, licking his lips. The wound in his chest sealed shut with wet, organic sounds, flesh knitting back together in defiance of every natural law. "Boring," he pronounced. "No sport at all. But I suppose I should be grateful for the meal. Now then." He adjusted his glasses and surveyed the chamber with genuine interest. "Where exactly am I? This doesn't feel like London. Wrong stars, wrong everything, really." The remaining guards attacked in unison. Alucard laughed and drew his weapons, two massive pistols that materialized from his coat, weapons that should not exist, that seemed to pulse with malevolent hunger of their own. The castle and jackals spoke, and their voices were thunder. Explosive rounds punched through combat armor and the walls beyond, sending guards flying in sprays of blood and shattered plastoid. When Emperor Palpatine arrived 5 minutes later, flanked by 2 full squads of reinforcements, he found Alucard sitting on his throne at the far end of the chamber, boots propped up on a pile of corpses, cleaning blood from beneath his fingernails with one razor-sharp claw. "Ah," the vampire said, his red eyes fixing on the Emperor with predatory interest. "The one responsible for pulling me through, I presume? I felt your little ritual. Clumsy work, really, but effective. I should thank you." He stood, and despite the Emperor's considerable power in the Force, Palpatine felt something he had not experienced in decades: uncertainty. This creature before him was a void in the Force, a blank spot where there should have been life energy. Not dead, not alive, but something else entirely. "What are you?" Palpatine demanded, yellow eyes narrowing. Alucard's smile could have lit the chamber with its malevolence. "I am the no-life king. I am the count of all counts. I am Alucard, and you, old man, have just made existence interesting again." He stepped over the bodies, glass crunching beneath his boots. "So tell me, what sort of galaxy have I found myself in? What wars are being waged? What blood is being spilled?" His tongue ran across his fangs. "And most importantly, who here is strong enough to make me feel something resembling fear? Because judging from these appetizers," he gestured dismissively at the dead guards, "I'm going to need better prey." The Emperor stared at this impossible creature, this thing that his ritual had drawn from beyond reality itself, and began to calculate. A being that could not be sensed through the Force. A weapon that could not be killed. But the look in those crimson eyes suggested something that sent a chill through even Palpatine's ancient heart. This was not a weapon that could be wielded. This was a weapon that chose its own targets. Outside the observatory, Coruscant's billions continued their lives, unaware that a new apex predator had arrived in their galaxy. One that grew stronger with every kill. One that could not be stopped by conventional means. One that was very, very hungry after its dimensional journey. And somewhere in the lower levels of the city planet, an Inquisitor hunting the last remnants of the Jedi Order felt a sudden, inexplicable chill run down his spine, as if something ancient and terrible had just turned its gaze toward the galaxy and found it wanting. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. The Inquisitor, known as the Eighth Brother, had hunted Jedi for 3 years. He had learned to sense the subtle ripples in the Force that betrayed Force-sensitive refugees, to recognize the desperate patterns of those who thought they could hide from the Empire's reach. He was good at his work, efficient, ruthless. He had personally delivered 17 Jedi to Vader's interrogation chambers, had watched the light fade from their eyes as they realized the Order would never rise again. Tonight, tracking a former Padawan through Coruscant's level 1313, he felt something he had never encountered before. Absolute emptiness, where something should exist. The target had fled into an abandoned factory district, one of thousands of such ruins that pockmarked the lower levels. The Eighth Brother moved through the darkness with predatory confidence, his double-bladed lightsaber humming softly at his side. The Padawan was young, untrained, frightened. This would be over quickly. Then the screaming started. The Inquisitor rounded a corner and stopped dead. The Padawan, a Mirialan girl no older than 16, hung suspended in midair, her body convulsing as something drank from the wound in her throat. The something wore the shape of a man, but the Eighth Brother's Force senses recoiled in confusion and horror. There was nothing there, no life signature, no presence in the Force at all, just a void in the shape of a predator, and the girl's essence draining away into that impossible darkness. Alucard sensed the Inquisitor's arrival and lifted his head from his meal, blood running down his chin in crimson streams. His eyes glowed like dying stars in the factory's gloom. "Oh, don't stop on my account," he said pleasantly, dropping the Padawan's desiccated corpse. It hit the Duracrete with a hollow thud. "I was just finishing." She was terrified, poor thing. The fear makes the blood taste. He licked his lips. Exquisite. The Eighth Brother ignited both blades of his lightsaber, crimson light casting sharp shadows across the walls. "You killed a valuable prisoner of the Empire," he said, his voice modulated through his mask. "Lord Vader will want to question you." Alucard laughed, the sound echoing wrong in the confined space, layered with voices that had no right existing in a single throat. "Lord Vader? How dramatic. Let me guess, he's your master? Your dark overlord?" The vampire stepped forward, and the Inquisitor noticed with growing unease that the lightsaber's glow seemed to dim near the creature, as if the light itself was being devoured. "I've served masters before. It never ends well for them." The Inquisitor attacked without further preamble, spinning his lightsaber in the deadly helicopter pattern that had dismembered dozens of opponents. The plasma blades carved through the space where Alucard stood and passed through empty air. The vampire had moved, faster than even Force-enhanced reflexes could track, appearing behind the Inquisitor with one hand already extended toward his back. "Too slow," Alucard whispered. The Eighth Brother spun, bringing his lightsaber around in a desperate parry. The blade caught Alucard's arm, shearing through flesh and bone in a spray of blood and the stench of burning meat. The vampire's severed limb hit the ground, still twitching. The Inquisitor allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Fast, but not invulnerable. He could... Alucard looked at his stump, then at the Inquisitor, then threw back his head and laughed with genuine delight. "Oh, that actually hurt. How wonderful!" The stump erupted in a fountain of blood and writhing shadows. In seconds, a new arm had grown, perfect and whole, flexing its clawed fingers experimentally. "It's been so long since something managed to damage me. You've earned a reward." The factory floor exploded into chaos. Alucard stopped holding back. He moved through the darkness like liquid shadow, appearing and disappearing in the spaces between seconds. The Inquisitor called upon the Force, enhancing his speed, his perception, his strength, and found it made no difference. He couldn't sense his opponent, couldn't predict his movements, couldn't feel the future echoes that normally warned of incoming attacks. A fist crashed into his ribs with enough force to crack the durasteel plating beneath his robes. He flew backward, smashing through a support pillar. His lightsaber spun away, deactivating as it clattered across the floor. The Inquisitor struggled to his feet, tasting blood behind his mask, feeling broken bones grind together. Alucard stood in the center of the factory, his silhouette backlit by the distant glow of the city planet's eternal lights. He had drawn his pistols, massive hand cannons that no normal human should have been able to lift, let alone fire accurately. "You're confused," the vampire observed, tilting his head. "You're reaching out with that energy you people use. The Force, I heard the girl call it before she died. But you can't feel me, can you? I'm not alive, you see. Haven't been for a very, very long time. What are you?" The eighth brother gasped. I already told your emperor. I'm a vampire, an undead monster. A creature that feeds on the living to sustain an existence that should have ended centuries ago. Alucard's smile was a slash of white in the darkness. In my universe, I was the apex predator. Here. He gestured expansively at the city around them. Here I find an entire galaxy of prey that has never encountered anything like me. Do you know what that means? The Inquisitor tried to call his lightsaber back to his hand, but Alucard moved first. A single gunshot shattered the weapon mid-flight, sending crystal fragments and burning components scattering across the floor. The vampire was beside him then, moving too fast for the eye to follow. One hand wrapped around the Inquisitor's throat. It means I'm going to enjoy myself immensely. Alucard finished, lifting the Inquisitor off his feet with casual strength. Now, before I add you to my collection, tell me, where can I find more of your kind? These Jedi seem disappointingly weak, but you're something else. Darker, more interesting. The eighth brother struggled, clawing at the iron grip around his throat, calling on the Force to crush the creature before him. Dark side energy crackled through the air, shadows deepening, temperature plummeting. Alucard's coat whipped in the supernatural wind, his hair dancing wildly, but his smile never wavered. If anything, it widened. Yes, the vampire purred. More of that. Show me your darkness. Show me your rage. He drew the Inquisitor closer, crimson eyes blazing. Show me if you can make me feel something other than boredom. The eighth brother channeled everything he had, every ounce of dark side power he'd accumulated through years of hunting and killing, and unleashed it directly into Alucard's face. Force lightning erupted from his fingertips, white hot and crackling, enough electrical fury to reduce a living being to ash. Alucard threw back his head and laughed as the lightning washed over him, his body convulsing with what might have been agony or ecstasy. It was impossible to tell which. The vampire's flesh charred and blackened, burning away to reveal muscle and bone beneath. But still he laughed, the sound echoing with the screams of millions of consumed souls. When the lightning finally sputtered out, the Inquisitor hanging limp in Alucard's grasp, the vampire's ruined face began to regenerate. Flesh crawled back over exposed bone, eyes reformed in their sockets. Within seconds, he was whole again, not even his coat showing damage. Disappointing, Alucard said, and bit down. The eighth brother's death took longer than the Padawans. Alucard savored it, drinking slowly, feeling the Inquisitor's memories and experiences flow into him, along with the blood. He saw worlds burning, Jedi dying, a Dark Lord in black armor dispensing orders with mechanical precision. He saw an Emperor wreathed in darkness, pulling the strings of an entire galaxy. He saw war and suffering and oppression on a scale that almost impressed him. When he dropped the corpse, Alucard stood for a long moment in the factory's darkness, processing what he'd learned. This galaxy was vast beyond comprehension. Millions of worlds, billions of beings, all of them potential prey. And at the top of the food chain, 2 Sith Lords who thought they controlled everything. They have no idea what's coming, Alucard said to the empty air. And somewhere in the depths of his consumed souls, the eighth brother's essence screamed in eternal horror. The vampire adjusted his glasses, holstered his weapons, and walked out into the neon-drenched night of Coruscant's lower levels. He had feeding to do, an empire to explore, and eventually, he'd introduce himself properly to this Lord Vader the Inquisitor had served. After all, it had been so long since he'd fought someone who might actually pose a challenge. The reports reached Darth Vader within the hour. An Inquisitor dead, drained of blood, found in the lower levels alongside a deceased Jedi Padawan who had suffered an identical fate. Security footage showed a figure in red, the same figure that had massacred the Emperor's royal guards in the observatory ritual chamber 3 days prior. Vader stood in his meditation chamber aboard the Executor, his superstar destroyer, studying the holoprojections with mechanical precision. The figure moved through the security footage like a ghost, appearing and disappearing between frames. When visible, its eyes glowed crimson, reflecting camera light like an animal's. It had killed the Inquisitor with bare hands and teeth, no weapons, no force abilities, just raw, predatory violence. And Vader could not sense it through the Force. This troubled him more than the deaths themselves. The Force revealed all living things, all connections, all presences. But this creature was a blank space, a void where something should exist. It reminded him uncomfortably of the Yuuzhan Vong legends from ancient texts, beings supposedly outside the Force's touch. But this was different. The Yuuzhan Vong had been alien. This thing wore a human shape, spoke basic, and moved through Coruscant as if it owned the planet. Lord Vader, the communications officer's voice crackled through his helmet's internal speakers. The Emperor requests your presence immediately. He says it concerns the anomaly. Vader turned from the holoprojections, his cape swirling with the movement. Prepare my shuttle. I will return to Coruscant within the hour. The throne room of the Imperial Palace was empty when Vader arrived, save for Palpatine himself, standing before the massive transparisteel viewport that overlooked the city planet's glittering expanse. The Emperor did not turn as Vader approached, his attention fixed on something in the distance. The creature from the ritual, Vader said without preamble. It has killed the 8th brother. I am aware, Palpatine replied, his voice carrying an edge Vader had rarely heard, something almost resembling caution. It has killed 17 Imperial soldiers, 5 gang enforcers in the lower levels, and consumed them all. With each death, it grows stronger. I can feel its presence spreading like a cancer across Coruscant. Yet the Force itself seems unable to touch it directly. Vader moved to stand beside his master, gazing out at the city. What is it? A mistake, Palpatine admitted, the words clearly bitter on his tongue. My ritual sought to pierce the veil between life and death, to touch the essence of immortality. Instead, I opened a door to something beyond our reality, something that calls itself a vampire, a creature of undeath from a universe where such things apparently exist. He finally turned to face Vader, yellow eyes gleaming in the dim light. It cannot be sensed through the Force, because it is not truly alive. It has consumed millions of souls in its own reality and carries them within itself. The life energy we sense is scrambled, incomprehensible. Can it be destroyed? Vader asked. Unknown. Lightsabers damage it, but it regenerates from any wound within seconds. It survived Force lightning that should have reduced it to ash. The Royal Guard's weapons were useless. Palpatine's lips curled into something that might have been a smile. It is, in many ways, exactly what I sought to become. Immortal, unkillable, beyond the limitations of flesh. His expression darkened. But it cannot be controlled. It serves no master, fears no threat, and finds our galaxy amusing. Vader's respirator hissed in the silence that followed. You wish me to eliminate it. I wish you to attempt to eliminate it, Palpatine corrected. If you succeed, we will have eliminated a potential threat. If you fail and survive, We will learn its weaknesses. Either outcome serves the Empire. The Emperor gestured toward the viewport. It was last seen in the factory district on level 1313. It seems to be hunting Force sensitives and those who serve the dark side. Perhaps it finds our power appetizing. Vader studied the city below, calculating odds and strategies. An enemy that could not be sensed was one that could not be predicted. An enemy that regenerated from any wound was one that could not be worn down. But nothing was truly immortal. Everything had a weakness. Even the Force itself could be manipulated by those who understood its nature. I will find it, Vader said, and I will determine if it can be killed. One more thing, my apprentice, Palpatine called as Vader turned to leave. It spoke to me before it departed the observatory. It asked who in this galaxy was strong enough to make it feel fear. I believe it is actively seeking worthy opponents. The Emperor's smile turned cold. Be careful you do not give it what it desires. Level 1313 was a monument to Coruscant's decay. Here, far below the gleaming spires and senatorial districts, civilization had collapsed into anarchy. The factories had long since been abandoned, their automated systems failing, their workers fleeing to higher, safer levels. What remained was darkness, rust, and the dregs of galactic society. Criminals, fugitives, and those with nowhere else to go. Vader walked through the empty streets with a full complement of 501st Legion troopers at his back. Their armor gleamed white even in the dim glow of failing lights, their weapons held ready. They had been briefed on the target: hostile, extremely dangerous, resistant to conventional weapons. They did not know the details. They did not need to. The Sith Lord extended his senses through the Force, searching for any disturbance, any hint of the creature's presence. He felt the teeming masses of life in the levels above and below, felt the flickering presences of rats and other vermin in the ruins around him, felt even the faint echoes of old suffering that stained this place. But nowhere did he sense the void he sought. Spread out, he commanded the troopers. Search patterns Delta. Report any contact immediately. The 501st moved with practiced efficiency, splitting into squads and disappearing into the factory district's labyrinthine passages. Vader stood alone in what had once been a manufacturing plaza, his respirator's rhythm the only sound beyond distant dripping water and the hum of struggling power systems. Hello, Lord Vader? The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. Vader spun, lightsaber igniting in a blaze of crimson, but saw nothing. The Force offered no warning, no sense of threat or presence, only emptiness. I've been waiting for you, Alucard continued, his voice echoing from the darkness. The Emperor's pet monster, they call you. The Jedi killer. The enforcer of tyranny. A laugh, rich with dark amusement. We have so much in common, you and I. Both servants who destroyed those we once protected. Both monsters wearing the shape of men. Vader reached out with the Force, not to sense, but to act. Debris lifted from the ground, rusted metal and broken duracrete, and launched in every direction with telekinetic fury. The improvised projectiles smashed into walls and shattered against floors, filling the plaza with a storm of destruction. When the dust settled, Alucard stood 20 meters away, leaning casually against a support pillar with his arms crossed. Not a speck of dust marred his red coat. His smile was sharp enough to cut. Impressive display, the vampire said. That energy you wield, the Force. I've felt it now from several of your Inquisitors before I consumed them. It's remarkable, really. A sort of universal consciousness that binds all living things. Quite poetic. He pushed off from the pillar and began walking toward Vader with lazy confidence. But here's the problem. I'm not alive. That beautiful web of energy you command, it can't touch me, can't sense me, can't predict me. To your force, I'm simply nothing. Vader raised his lightsaber in a two-handed guard stance. You will learn the power of the dark side, creature. All things can be dominated by sufficient will. Will I? Alucard's grin widened impossibly, revealing far too many teeth. Then by all means, Lord Vader, show me. The Dark Lord attacked with the fury that had felled countless Jedi, his lightsaber a blur of crimson light, each strike carrying the weight of force-enhanced strength and decades of combat mastery. Alucard dodged the first 3 strikes with inhuman grace, moving in ways that defied prediction, then caught the 4th blow with his bare hand. The lightsaber's plasma blade bit into the vampire's palm, cutting through flesh with the characteristic hiss of superheated tissue. Alucard looked at the wound with academic interest, then looked up at Vader's masked face. That does sting, he admitted, then ripped the lightsaber from Vader's grip with strength that should not have existed and tossed it away like a toy. But pain is an old friend. Vader called upon the Force, channeling dark side energy into a crushing telekinetic grip around the vampire's entire body. Bones should have shattered. Organs should have ruptured. Any normal being would have been compressed into a sphere of pulped flesh. Alucard stood unmoved, his regenerated hand flexing experimentally. Is that all? The vampire asked mildly. Then he moved. One moment he stood before Vader, the next he was behind him, hand pressed against the back of the Dark Lord's helmet. You hide behind that armor, that mask. What would happen if I tore it away? Would the great Darth Vader die from exposure to the air? Or is there something more pathetic beneath all that metal and fury? Vader spun, mechanical arms swinging with piston-driven force. But Alucard had already danced away. The 501st troopers burst into the plaza from 3 different entrances, weapons raised, and opened fire without hesitation. Blaster bolts filled the air, crimson energy beams converging on the vampire from multiple angles. Alucard stood in the center of the storm and laughed as the bolts tore through him, burning holes in his body, shredding his coat, blackening his flesh. He spread his arms wide, welcoming the destruction, and when the troopers' weapons finally overheated and their barrage ceased, he remained standing. His body was a ruin of burned meat and exposed bone. But even as they watched, it began to regenerate. Better, Alucard said through a half-formed mouth. Much better. But you'll need to try harder than that. Vader retrieved his lightsaber with a force pull and charged forward, no longer attempting strategy or precision. If the creature could regenerate from any wound, he would simply ensure there was nothing left to regenerate from. He poured the force into his strikes, each blow carrying enough power to shear through durasteel, targeting the vampire's neck, his torso, his limbs. Anywhere that might prove vulnerable. Alucard met him blow for blow, drawing his massive pistols and firing point blank into Vader's armored chest. The explosive rounds cracked armor plating and sent the Sith Lord staggering backward. The vampire pressed his advantage, moving with impossible speed, a whirlwind of claws and fangs and brutal physical force that would have overwhelmed any normal opponent. But Vader was far from normal. He called upon the pain from his wounds, fed it into the dark side, and unleashed force lightning from his mechanical hand. The electricity arced into Alucard's body with crackling fury, and for a moment, just a moment, the vampire's regeneration slowed. There, Vader rumbled. You can be hurt. Alucard's response was to grab the Dark Lord's outstretched arm and pull him into a headbutt that cracked Vader's mask. Then the vampire bit down on the Sith Lord's shoulder, teeth punching through armor and flesh, and drank. The pain was exquisite. Vader felt his blood being drawn out, felt his strength being stolen, felt something fundamental being ripped from him. He channeled the agony into the Force, creating a repulsion wave that blasted Alucard backward through 3 walls. The vampire crashed into a manufacturing assembly line, which collapsed around him in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. Vader stood, breathing heavily through his damaged respirator, black blood seeping from the wound in his shoulder. The 501st rushed to his side, weapons trained on the ruins where Alucard had fallen. For several long seconds, there was silence. Then the wreckage exploded outward. Alucard rose from the debris, his body whole once more, his eyes blazing brighter than before. He licked Vader's blood from his lips with evident satisfaction. "Fascinating," the vampire said. "Your blood tastes of suffering, of betrayal, of a man who burned everything he loved and now drowns in eternal regret." He smiled, gentler this time, almost pitying. "We really are the same, you and I. Monsters who can never die, can never be redeemed, can never escape what we've become." Vader said nothing. He simply raised his hand and began to crush the factory around them, bringing tons of metal and duracrete down upon the vampire's head. When the dust finally cleared, Alucard was gone, disappeared into the shadows, leaving only a trail of blood, both his own and Vader's, and the echo of mocking laughter. The Dark Lord stood among the ruins, damaged but unbowed, and made a decision. This creature could not be killed by conventional means, but it could perhaps be trapped, contained, studied, and if it truly sought worthy opponents, it would return. Alucard had tasted his blood, had felt his power, had recognized in Vader a kindred darkness. The vampire would come back, and next time, Vader would be ready. Emperor Palpatine stood before the holographic strategic display in his private war room, studying reports that troubled him more with each passing hour. 43 Imperial personnel dead in 5 days. 28 gang members in the lower levels. 6 bounty hunters who had been foolish enough to accept contracts on the Red Ghost. All drained of blood, all consumed by the creature that walked Coruscant streets with impunity. Vader's confrontation had yielded valuable intelligence. The vampire could be damaged by sustained assault, could be temporarily disrupted by Force lightning, but nothing that suggested a permanent solution. And worse, far worse, was the information flowing through the Imperial intelligence network. Sightings of the creature across multiple sectors, whispers spreading through the underworld. Fear creeping through even the most hardened criminal syndicates. The galaxy was beginning to learn that something new hunted in the darkness. "Your creature grows bold," a voice said from the shadows near the chamber entrance. Palpatine did not turn. He recognized the voice, though it had been months since its owner had deigned to visit Coruscant. "Count Dooku is dead, yet still the Separatists haunt me," he said dryly. "What brings you from your exile, old friend?" The figure that emerged from the shadows wore elegant robes of black and silver, his silver beard immaculately trimmed, his posture radiating aristocratic authority despite his advanced age. But this was not Count Dooku. This man had served the Sith for far longer, had survived Order 66 through careful planning and complete subservience to the Emperor's will. "Curiosity," the man said. "When the Force itself recoils from something in confusion, even one as withdrawn as myself takes notice. What have you unleashed, my Emperor?" Palpatine finally turned, regarding his visitor with calculating yellow eyes. "Something beyond the Force's dominion, a being from another reality entirely. pulled through a dimensional rift by my experiments in immortality. He gestured to the holographic display, which now showed security footage of Alucard tearing through a squad of stormtroopers. It calls itself a vampire, undead, a predator that feeds on blood and cannot be permanently destroyed. The visitor watched the footage with academic interest, head tilted. And yet, you do not seem distressed, my lord. You see opportunity. I see a weapon, if it can be aimed. I see a test of our Empire's strength. I see... Palpatine's expression grew thoughtful. A being that has accomplished what I have sought for decades. True immortality, not through the Force, but through the consumption of life itself. It carries millions of souls within its body, absorbed over centuries of existence. Each death makes it stronger, more resilient, more impossible to kill. Dangerous, the visitor murmured. Such power cannot be controlled through conventional means. No, Palpatine agreed. But perhaps it need not be controlled. Perhaps it merely needs persuasion, incentive. The creature spoke to me after its arrival. It seeks entertainment, worthy opponents, and above all, it seeks to avoid boredom. We can provide those things. The Emperor's smile turned predatory. Every threat to the Empire becomes potential prey. Every rebel cell, every Jedi survivor, every political dissident, all of them feeding the vampire, all of them strengthening our unwitting ally. And when it tires of hunting your enemies? The visitor asked. When it turns its hunger upon the Empire itself? Palpatine's laugh was dry and mirthless. Then we will have learned whether even a creature of undeath can stand against the full might of the dark side. But that time is not yet. For now, I will make the vampire an offer, one that appeals to its nature. You truly believe it will cooperate? I believe it will find cooperation more interesting than opposition. For now. The Emperor gestured, and the hologram shifted to display a new image, a fortress world on the outer rim, bristling with defensive emplacements. There is a Jedi temple on Lothal that has become a gathering point for Force-sensitive refugees. The Inquisitorius has been unable to penetrate their defenses. They have help from a group of rebels who are proving surprisingly competent. I will offer the vampire a feast. In exchange, we eliminate a thorn in the Empire's side. The visitor frowned. A dangerous precedent, my Emperor. Bargaining with such a creature is necessary. Palpatine interrupted coldly. The creature is here. It cannot be immediately destroyed. Therefore, it must be utilized. The Sith do not destroy useful tools simply because they are dangerous. They wield them until a better option presents itself. His eyes glowed in the dim light. Now leave me. I have a meeting to arrange. Alucard found the summons amusing. The Emperor's messenger, a trembling ISB officer who looked ready to bolt at any moment, delivered the invitation with as much dignity as he could muster, while standing before a creature that had killed 17 of his colleagues. The vampire accepted the datapad, read the message, and smiled. The old man wants to negotiate, he said, more to himself than the officer. How delightfully pragmatic. Very well. Tell him I'll attend his little meeting. But if he bores me... He leaned close to the officer, crimson eyes blazing. Tell him I'll start with his throne room and work my way down. The officer fled. Alucard watched him go with amusement, then turned his attention to the coordinates included in the message. A private landing platform in the Imperial Palace's highest level. Neutral ground, supposedly. The Emperor was being careful. Smart. Perhaps this galaxy would prove entertaining after all. The meeting chamber was austere by Imperial standards. No throne, no guards. Just a simple round table in a room with a single viewport overlooking Coruscant's glittering expanse. Palpatine sat on one side, hands folded before him. Vader stood behind his master's right shoulder, a silent sentinel of black armor and mechanical menace. Alucard entered with his hands in his pockets, coat swirling behind him, and dropped into the chair opposite the Emperor with casual disrespect. "Nice view," the vampire observed, glancing at the city below. "I can see why you keep this planet, though the lower levels could use some work, and the screaming never stops down there, very atmospheric." "You have been busy," Palpatine said without preamble. 73 confirmed kills in one standard week. The underworld fears you. My inquisitors avoid the districts where you hunt. You are becoming problematic. Problematic, Alucard repeated, tasting the word. "Is that what you call a predator operating freely in your empire?" "I'd call it refreshing. This galaxy has forgotten what real fear tastes like. I'm just reminding them." He leaned back, boots propped on the table. "So, what do you want, old man? Here to threaten me again? Promise destruction if I don't leave your precious empire alone?" "No," Palpatine said simply. "I am here to offer you a proposition, one that serves both our interests." Alucard's eyebrows rose. "I'm listening." "You seek worthy prey, entertainment, opponents who might actually challenge you. I can provide targets. Force sensitives, Jedi survivors, rebel cells, all of them dangerous, all of them skilled. You eliminate threats to the Empire while satisfying your hunger. In exchange, I do not dedicate the full resources of my military to containing you." Palpatine gestured elegantly. A mutually beneficial arrangement. The vampire was silent for a long moment, studying the Emperor with those unreadable crimson eyes. Then he laughed. Not the mocking laughter Vader had heard, but genuine amusement. "You want me to be your hunting dog? Point me at your enemies and watch me tear them apart while you consolidate power." He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "That's actually clever. I'm impressed. Most people in your position would have tried to kill me or imprison me or some other pointless gesture. But you see the practical value in a monster." "I see reality," Palpatine corrected. "You cannot be immediately destroyed. You will not simply leave this galaxy. Therefore, your presence must be turned to advantage. This is basic strategic thinking." "And what's to stop me from killing you right now?" Alucard asked conversationally. "I've tasted Vader's blood. I know he's powerful. But we both know how that fight ended. He gestured at the Emperor. "You're old. You're alone in this room with me. And you smell absolutely delicious. All that dark side energy swirling through your veins. I wonder what drinking a Sith Lord would feel like." Vader's hand moved toward his lightsaber. Palpatine raised one finger, stopping his apprentice without looking away from Alucard. "You will not kill me," the Emperor said calmly, "because I am the most interesting person you have met in this galaxy. Because killing me would destabilize an empire of millions of worlds, and chaos, true chaos, would actually bore you after the initial excitement. Because you recognize in me a kindred spirit, someone who has sacrificed everything for power, who has twisted themselves into something beyond human, who rules through fear and force of will." His smile was almost friendly. "We are not so different, vampire. Both of us are monsters wearing crowns." Alucard stared at the Emperor for several heartbeats, then threw back his head and laughed with genuine delight. "Oh, I like you. You're completely insane, utterly evil, and absolutely fascinating. Yes, I accept your proposition. Point me at your Jedi, your rebels, your threats. Let me hunt them. Let me feed. And in exchange, he stood, looming over the table. I won't kill you. Yet. Yet, Palpatine echoed. An honest answer. I appreciate honesty. He produced a datapad and slid it across the table. Your first target, a Jedi temple on Lothal, protected by rebel operatives and defended by Force-sensitive refugees. The Inquisitorius has failed to breach their defenses. You will succeed where they have failed. Alucard picked up the datapad, scanning the information with crimson eyes that reflected the screen's glow. Lothal, Outer Rim, Frontier World. Not exactly prime hunting grounds, but... He zoomed in on surveillance images of the rebels in question. Some of these look competent. That'll have to do. He pocketed the datapad and turned toward the exit, then paused. One more thing, Emperor. This arrangement. It lasts exactly as long as I find it entertaining. The moment I get bored, the moment I decide your enemies aren't worth hunting, I'll find new prey. And your empire has billions of potential meals. I would expect nothing less, Palpatine replied. That is what makes you useful. A tame monster is just a pet. A wild monster with temporary common interests. That is a weapon. Alucard grinned, all teeth and menace. Smart man. No wonder you rule the galaxy. He walked to the door, then called back over his shoulder. Oh, and Vader? Next time we fight, I won't go easy on you. That mechanical breathing of yours? I'm going to find out what happens when I drain you dry. See if your machine parts keep working without blood to fuel them. The door hissed shut behind him. Vader turned to his master. You truly believe this arrangement will hold? No, Palpatine admitted. But it does not need to hold forever. Only long enough for us to learn his weaknesses, to develop countermeasures, to prepare for the inevitable confrontation. He rose from his chair, leaning heavily on his cane. The vampire is powerful, but he is also arrogant. He believes himself invincible. That arrogance will be his downfall. Until then, we use him. And if he eliminates some troublesome Jedi and rebels in the process, so much the better. Vader watched through the viewport as a shuttle departed from the platform below, carrying the vampire toward the Outer Rim, toward Lothal, toward targets who had no idea what was coming for them. I fought him, Vader said quietly. He is not like anything we have encountered. The Force does not touch him. Conventional weapons are useless. Even lightsabers only slow his regeneration. Everything can be killed, my apprentice, Palpatine replied. We simply have not yet discovered how, but we will. In the meantime, let the vampire hunt. Let him believe himself our ally. And let us observe very carefully how he kills, how he feeds, how he moves. Knowledge is power, Lord Vader, and power is what separates the Sith from the dead. In the lower levels of Coruscant, in the shadows where Alucard had hunted for a week, the gangs and criminals whispered a new legend. The Red Death, they called him. The Blood Ghost. The thing that hunted in darkness and left only corpses behind. Some claimed he was a Sith experiment gone wrong. Others said he was a demon from beyond reality. None of them knew the truth. And in a few days, on a backwater world called Lothal, a group of Jedi and rebels would learn that the Empire had found a new kind of nightmare to unleash upon them. One that could not be reasoned with, could not be redeemed, and could not be stopped. Alucard smiled as his shuttle entered hyperspace, already imagining the taste of Force-sensitive blood. The hunt was on. Lothal's twin moons cast pale light across the grasslands, as Alucard's shuttle descended toward the planet's surface. He had dismissed the Imperial pilot before entering the system. Witnesses were inconvenient, and he preferred to work alone. The shuttle's autopilot handled the landing with mechanical efficiency, setting down 5 kilometers from the target coordinates in a region the datapad designated as uninhabited wilderness. The vampire stepped off the landing ramp and breathed deeply, tasting the air. Grass, soil, the faint ozone smell of distant settlements. And underneath it all, the subtle electric tang of the Force. He could feel it here. Stronger than on Coruscant, this world was alive in ways the city planet had forgotten. Its connection to the universal energy, unfiltered by quadrillions of competing life signatures. Quaint, Alucard murmured, adjusting his glasses. Almost reminds me of the English countryside. Before I burned most of it, anyway. The temple complex sat atop a mesa, 20 kilometers to the northeast, visible even from here as a dark silhouette against the starlit sky. According to Imperial intelligence, it housed approximately 40 Force-sensitive refugees. Failed Padawans, untrained children, Force sensitives who had fled the Purge and found sanctuary in this forgotten corner of the galaxy. They were protected by a rebel cell that had proven irritatingly competent at evading Imperial forces. Alucard began walking. He could have flown, could have moved through shadows, could have crossed the distance in minutes. But there was no rush. The prey didn't know he was coming. The hunt was always better when the target felt safe. Inside the temple, Kanan Jarrus sat in meditation, trying and failing to find peace. The former Padawan had built something here, something fragile and precious. A sanctuary for those the Empire wanted dead. Children too young to understand why soldiers hunted them. Adults whose only crime was being born with a gift. With the help of his crew aboard the Ghost and a network of sympathetic locals, they had created a refuge. But tonight, the Force whispered warnings. Can't sleep? Hera Syndulla's voice came from the doorway. The Twi'lek pilot leaned against the frame, her leku draped over one shoulder, concern evident in her green eyes. Kanan opened his eyes, abandoning the meditation. Something's wrong. The Force feels disturbed. Like there's a void approaching, a blank space where something should be. The Inquisitors again? No, this is different. He stood, hand instinctively moving to his lightsaber. The Inquisitors burn in the Force like torches, dark but visible. This is... He struggled for words. Absence. Nothing. As if reality itself is being eaten. Hera's hand moved to her blaster. I'll wake the others. If the Empire's trying something new. It's not the Empire, Kanan interrupted, though he wasn't sure how he knew. Or at least, not just the Empire. Whatever's coming, it's something the galaxy hasn't seen before. In the temple's lower levels, 13-year-old Ezra Bridger woke from a nightmare he couldn't remember. Heart pounding, cold sweat soaking his shirt. He reached out through the Force instinctively, seeking reassurance from the life around him. The other refugees sleeping in their quarters, the guards on patrol, the nocturnal creatures hunting in the grasslands below the mesa. And felt something looking back. Not seeing, not sensing. Looking. As if his Force probe had touched something that noticed and was now following the connection back to its source. Something that smiled with far too many teeth. Ezra severed the connection with a gasp, scrambling out of bed. He had to warn Kanan. Had to... The lights went out. Emergency glow rods flickered on throughout the complex, casting everything in sickly blue-white light. Alarms began wailing. Hera's voice crackled over the comms. All personnel, we have a perimeter breach. Unknown hostile southeast entrance. All combat-capable personnel report to... The transmission cut off with a scream. Kanan ran through the corridors, lightsaber igniting in his hand, Ezra close behind him. Other rebels joined them, Zeb with his bow rifle, Sabine checking her blaster's charge, a dozen more volunteers who had sworn to protect this place. They converged on the southeast entrance, weapons ready, and found bodies. 5 guards, all dead. Not shot, not cut down, drained. Their skin had a gray, withered quality, as if they'd aged decades in seconds. And in the center of the carnage stood a figure in red, casually wiping blood from his mouth with the back of one hand. "Good evening," Alucard said pleasantly. "I do hope I'm not interrupting anything important." "Well, no, that's a lie. I very much hope I am interrupting something important. More dramatic that way." Kanan felt his connection to the Force recoil from the figure before him. It was like looking at a hole in reality, a space where the Force simply stopped. "What are you?" "Direct. I appreciate that." Alucard stepped over the corpses, glass crunching beneath his boots. "I'm a vampire, a monster. The thing your species tells stories about to frighten children. And I'm here on behalf of the Empire to kill every Force sensitive in this temple." He tilted his head, crimson eyes sweeping across the assembled defenders. "Nothing personal, just business. Though I confess, I'm hoping some of you will make it interesting." Zeb opened fire first, his bow rifle's energy blast catching Alucard in the chest and blowing a fist-sized hole through his torso. The vampire looked down at the wound, then up at the Lasat, and grinned. "Oh, good. You're not going to bore me with negotiations." The hole sealed shut in seconds, flesh knitting back together with wet, organic sounds. Zeb's second shot took Alucard in the head, snapping it back with the impact. The vampire's body stood motionless for a heartbeat, then his head rolled forward again, the wound already healing, and his smile had somehow grown wider. "My turn," Alucard said, and disappeared. Chaos erupted. The vampire moved through the defenders like a scythe through wheat, appearing and disappearing in the spaces between heartbeats. Claws tore through armor. Teeth found throats. Blaster bolts passed through empty air where he had been milliseconds before. Kanan tried to track him through the Force and found nothing, no presence to lock onto, no future echoes to predict movements. A rebel screamed as Alucard materialized behind her, one hand punching through her back and emerging from her chest, fingers wrapped around her still-beating heart. The vampire leaned close and whispered something in her ear before draining her dry and dropping the corpse. Kanan charged forward, lightsaber blazing, and brought the plasma blade down in an overhead strike that would have bisected any normal opponent. Alucard caught the blade with one hand, the weapon burning through his palm, and yanked Kanan forward into a headbutt that cracked the Jedi's nose. Blood sprayed. The vampire's tongue darted out, catching drops in midair. "Force-sensitive blood," Alucard purred. "It has a certain quality, like fine wine compared to ordinary table vinegar. You're going to be delicious." Ezra screamed and thrust out both hands, calling on the Force with desperate strength. The telekinetic blow caught Alucard and hurled him backward through 3 walls. The vampire crashed into the temple's meditation chamber, demolishing stone walls and ancient carvings, and lay still in the rubble. "We need to evacuate," Kanan gasped, blood streaming from his broken nose. "Get everyone to the ships. This thing, it can't be fought. Not like this." "What about you?" Ezra asked. "I'll buy you time. Go." Kanan shoved the boy toward the evacuation corridor and turned back to face the ruins where Alucard had fallen. The vampire was already standing, dusting off his coat, looking more amused than injured. "A Jedi Master and his Padawan," Alucard observed, emerging from the rubble. How traditional. Tell me, Jedi, do you know what happened to most of your order? The Emperor showed me the recordings. The clones turning on their generals, the slaughter in the temple on Coruscant. Children cut down in their dormitories. He smiled with savage joy. This galaxy's violence is exquisite. You people have industrialized genocide. I'm almost jealous. Kanan attacked with everything he had, forms the three through Vi flowing together, strikes and parries enhanced by the Force, each movement precise and deadly. For 30 seconds, he managed to keep Alucard at bay, his lightsaber a barrier of plasma that even the vampire respected. Burns accumulated on Alucard's hands and arms, charred flesh that regenerated almost as quickly as it was damaged. Then the vampire tired of the game. He drew his pistols, the Casal and Jackal, and fired point blank. The explosive rounds caught Kanan in the shoulder and leg, spinning him around and sending him crashing to the floor. His lightsaber skittered away across the stone. Alucard stood over the fallen Jedi, pistols aimed at his head. You fought well, better than most. But you're protecting children, aren't you? Force-sensitive children that the Empire wants dead. He crouched down, bringing his face close to Kanan's. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell me where they are, and then I'm going to kill them quickly, painlessly, or... His smile turned cruel. You refuse, and I hunt them down slowly and make sure they suffer before I drain them. Your choice, Jedi. How much do you value their dignity and death? Go to hell. Kanan spat blood. Already been, Alucard replied cheerfully. Wasn't impressed. Now, the children... The temple shuddered. Outside, engines roared to life. The Ghost and 2 other transports launching from the mesa, carrying refugees toward the safety of hyperspace. Alucard's head snapped toward the sound, his expression shifting from amusement to irritation. They're running. How disappointing. He looked back at Kanan. That was your plan? Distraction while they escaped? Heroic, I'll admit. Futile, but heroic. He stood, holstering his weapons. I could chase them, should chase them, but... He glanced around the meditation chamber, at the ancient Jedi carvings and the lingering resonance of light side energy. This place interests me. And you're more valuable alive than dead. For now. Kanan tried to move, to reach his lightsaber, but his wounds prevented it. He could only watch as Alucard walked to the chamber's central shrine and ran his fingers across the carved stone. The Jedi built temples across the galaxy. The vampire mused. Monuments to their philosophy of peace and detachment. And then they fell, destroyed by one of their own. By a Padawan who turned to darkness and slaughtered them all. He looked back at Kanan with those terrible crimson eyes. Tell me, Jedi, do you ever wonder if your order deserved what happened? If maybe your rigid philosophy, your denial of human emotion, your arrogance, if maybe all of that earned you extinction? The Jedi weren't perfect. Kanan managed through gritted teeth. But we tried to help people, to protect the innocent. What do? You just kill and feed and destroy. True, Alucard acknowledged without shame. I am a monster. I have been a monster for over 500 years. I have burned cities, slaughtered armies, consumed thousands of souls. He turned back to Kanan, and something in his expression shifted. Still predatory, still dangerous, but touched with something that might have been melancholy. But I have never pretended to be anything else. I have never dressed my evil in righteousness. I have never convinced myself that my violence served a greater good. He crouched beside Kanan again. You Jedi served a republic built on corruption and slavery. Your peacekeeping propped up a system that ground billions beneath its boot. And you thought yourselves heroes. We tried. You failed. Alucard interrupted. And now your students hide in ruins while an empire hunts them like animals. So perhaps we're not so different after all, Jedi. Perhaps we're both just killers who tell ourselves pretty stories to justify the blood on our hands. Kanan said nothing. What could he say? The vampire wasn't entirely wrong. The Jedi had failed. The Republic had fallen. And now he was reduced to this, bleeding on the floor of a temple he'd tried to make into a sanctuary, while the refugees he'd sworn to protect fled into the night. Alucard stood and walked toward the exit, then paused in the doorway. I'm not going to kill you, Jedi. I'm going to let you live with your failure. Let you remember that you couldn't protect them. Let you know that some of them, many of them, will die because you weren't strong enough to stop me. He looked back over his shoulder. That suffering, that guilt, that's a far better meal than your blood would be. Enjoy it. Then he was gone, disappearing into the night, leaving Kanan alone with the dead and the distant sound of ships escaping into hyperspace. The Jedi lay there for a long time, staring at the ceiling, feeling the Force ripple with echoes of violence and death. 37 refugees had escaped. 8 had died in the initial assault. And somewhere in the galaxy, a monster wearing a man's shape was reporting his success to the Emperor. Kanan closed his eyes and reached out through the Force, finding Ezra's presence aboard the Ghost, safe and terrified and alive. That was something. That was enough to keep fighting for. But as he lay there in the ruins of his sanctuary, feeling his wounds slowly beginning to heal, Kanan Jarrus understood that the galaxy had changed. The Empire had unleashed something new, something that couldn't be fought with lightsabers and the Force, something that existed outside the ancient conflict between Jedi and Sith. And he had no idea how to stop it. The Ghost shuddered as it reverted to real space in a remote system far from Lothal, its crew silent and grim. In the cargo hold, huddled beneath thermal blankets, the surviving refugees from the temple wept or stared into nothingness. The air smelled of fear, sweat, and ozone. In the cockpit, Hera's hands were steady on the controls, but her voice was tight. We're clear. No Imperial pursuit. For now. Ezra sat slumped in the co-pilot's chair, his face pale. He couldn't stop seeing it. The red coat, the impossible speed, the way Kanan had fallen. What was that thing? He whispered, his voice cracking. It felt like nothing, like a hole in the universe. Zeb, leaning against the doorway with his arms crossed, grunted. A monster. That's what it was. A criffing monster that eats blaster bolts for breakfast. Sabine, cleaning her blaster with methodical intensity, didn't look up. It was toying with us. It could have killed us all. Why didn't it? It wanted to make a point, a weak voice said from the corridor. Kanan leaned heavily against the frame, his face bruised, his arm in a sling. It wanted us to know we were powerless, that our best wasn't good enough. Hera was out of her seat in an instant, guiding him to a chair. You should be resting. Resting won't change what happened, Kanan said, his voice hollow. He looked at Ezra. It called itself a vampire, an undead creature from another reality. The Emperor found it, or created it, and now he's using it as a hunting dog. So, what do we do? Sabine asked, finally looking up, her eyes hard. We can't fight that. Our weapons don't work. The Force doesn't work on it. We learn, Kanan said, his jaw tightening with a flicker of his old resolve. It has to have a weakness. Everything does. We need to understand what it is, what it wants, and how to hurt it. He turned to Hera. We need to contact the larger rebellion. Warn them. If the Empire is deploying this thing against other cells, they need to be prepared to run. Not fight. Run. As Hera began transmitting coded warnings on encrypted channels, a cold realization settled over the Ghost's crew. The rules of their war had just changed. The Empire no longer needed Star Destroyers or legions of stormtroopers to terrorize them. It had found something worse. Back on Lothal, Alucard stood atop the mesa, watching the stars. He could still taste the Jedi's despair in the air, a flavor more complex and satisfying than blood. The thrill of the hunt was a fleeting pleasure, but the lingering agony of a broken spirit. That was a vintage that aged beautifully. His comlink chirped, a secure Imperial channel. He activated it, not bothering with visual. Report, a cold mechanical voice demanded. Vader. The nest is scattered, Alucard said, his tone bored. A handful of dead. The rest fled like frightened birds. Your Jedi Master put up a decent fight. More spirit than your Inquisitors. I'll give him that. But in the end, he was just another man on his knees. The Emperor is satisfied with the initial result, Vader stated. Your next target is a rebel supply depot in the Mido system. Coordinates and dossiers are being transmitted now. Alucard chuckled. A supply depot? How mundane. You want me to burn crates of rations and blaster packs? I'm an artist, Lord Vader, not an arsonist for petty logistics. These supplies fuel the rebellion. Their destruction will save Imperial lives. I don't care about Imperial lives, Alucard replied flatly. I agreed to hunt your interesting prey. Jedi, Force sensitives, warriors, not starve out farmers and mechanics. Find me a real challenge, or I'll find my own entertainment. And I assure you, you won't like where I look. There was a long, static-filled silence. Vader's anger was a palpable force, even over the audio-only channel. You will follow your directives, creature. Or what? You'll send more men for me to eat? You'll try to electrocute me again? Alucard's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. I tasted your blood, Vader. I know the man trapped inside that machine. The fear, the regret, the little boy screaming for his mother. You're not a threat to me. You're a tragedy, and I've seen enough of those. He severed the connection before Vader could respond. This was the problem with empires, he mused. They were all about control, about order. They couldn't comprehend a force of nature, an entity that existed outside their hierarchies and chains of command. The Emperor was clever, but he was still a politician playing with tools he didn't understand. Alucard was no one's tool. He looked out at the galaxy, at the countless stars, each one potentially hiding a world teeming with life, with fear, with power. The Empire wanted to use him to cement its control. The rebellion would likely see him as just another Imperial horror to be destroyed. Both were so terribly limited in their vision. A new idea began to form, a dark and delightful amusement. What if he didn't play their game at all? What if he started his own? He wasn't a Sith, lusting for dominion. He wasn't a Jedi, clinging to a dead code. He was Alucard, and in a galaxy tearing itself apart with war, he could be the one thing both sides truly feared. An independent variable. A predator with no master, no territory, and no allegiance. He would hunt the Empire's Jedi, yes, but he would also hunt the Empire's Sith. He would hunt the Rebellion's heroes and the Underworld's villains. He would find the strongest, the most powerful, the most interesting beings this galaxy had to offer, and he would test himself against them. He would consume them, absorb their strength, their knowledge, their very essence, and in doing so, he would become the apex predator of a galaxy that had forgotten what real monsters looked like. He dissolved into a swarm of shadows and bats, flowing down from the mesa and into the night. The hunt was no longer about serving the Emperor. It was about a far more personal goal. It was time to teach this galaxy the meaning of true, undiluted terror. The reports that landed on Grand Admiral Thrawn's desk were fragmented, contradictory, and deeply troubling. They spoke of a single entity, operating with impunity across the mid-rim, leaving a trail of devastation that defied Imperial tactical doctrine. A garrison on Denan wiped out, every soldier drained of blood. A Black Sun outpost on Jarrus eviscerated, its leaders torn limb from limb. A hidden Jedi survivor on Dantooine discovered and consumed. There was no pattern, no strategic objective. It was not the work of the rebellion. It was predation, pure and simple. And it was escalating. Thrawn stood before his holoprojector, the blue light glinting off his glowing red eyes. He cycled through the evidence. Security footage of a red-clad figure moving through blaster fire as if it were rain. Autopsy reports describing impossible physiological regeneration, eyewitness accounts, those few who survived, of a laughing demon. The creature has deviated from its assigned targets, he said, his voice calm and measured. He was not addressing an underling, but the flickering hologram of Darth Vader. It is no longer a weapon you aim. It is a plague you have unleashed. Vader's masked visage was impassive. The Emperor believes it can still be utilized. Its actions, while chaotic, still primarily damage the Empire's enemies. A short-sighted view, Thrawn replied, his fingers steepled. Look at the cultural artifacts from its point of origin, Lord Vader. The data fragments the Emperor's ritual recovered. He tapped a control, and images of Gothic architecture, medieval tapestries depicting bat-like creatures, and texts on vampiric lore filled the screen. This is not a mindless beast. It is a being from a reality with its own deeply ingrained mythology of dominance, aristocracy, and sadistic entertainment. It is not serving the Empire. It is using the Empire's resources to find the most challenging prey. We are its gamekeepers, nothing more. Your analysis is noted, Admiral. Vader's voice was a low growl. What do you propose? I propose we stop treating it as a weapon and start treating it as the apex predator it is, Thrawn said. We study its habits. We lay a trap not with force, but with bait it cannot refuse. We understand its art. He zoomed in on a single frame from the Lothal Temple security feed. Alucard was looking directly at the camera, his smile not one of rage, but of profound, intellectual amusement. It enjoys the hunt. It revels in the despair of the strong. Therefore, we must present it with the ultimate hunt, and at its conclusion, the ultimate despair. Meanwhile, in the bowels of a derelict space station in the Griffon hegemony, Alucard was holding court. The station had been a pirate haven until he arrived. Now, its former occupants were either part of his growing internal legion of souls or strewn across the bulkheads as a warning. He sat on a makeshift throne of crates and scrap metal, idly swirling a glass of deep red liquid. Not blood, but a potent Corellian wine he'd found in the captain's locker. It was a pale imitation of the real thing, but the ritual of it was comforting. Before him, held in place by his will alone, floated a high-ranking Imperial Moff named Citron. The man was trembling, his fine robes stained with sweat. "Please," the Moff begged. "The Emperor will reward you handsomely for my return. Credits, power, systems to rule." "Boring," Alucard said, taking a sip. "I've had kings offer me their thrones. I've had popes offer me absolution. It all tastes like ashes." He leaned forward. "But you have access to the Imperial database. The real one. The one that lists all the interesting people. Not just the Jedi survivors. I want the Sith cultists Palpatine keeps in reserve. I want the names of the most dangerous bounty hunters. I want the locations of the ancient Sith tombs, the ones even Vader doesn't know about. I can't. The security protocols..." Alucard didn't move, but a shadow detached itself from the wall behind the Moff, solidifying into a familiar, ghastly form. The eighth brother, his eyes vacant, his movements jerky. The Inquisitor's spirit, one of Alucard's familiars, laid its ghostly hands on the Moff's shoulders. "You see," Alucard explained pleasantly, "when I consume someone, I don't just get their blood. I get their knowledge, their memories, their skills. This one," he gestured to the eighth brother, "knew many things, but not enough. You will provide the rest." The Moff broke, sobbing as the Phantom's cold touch seeped into his soul. He recited access codes, data routes, and hidden file directories. Alucard listened, committing it all to memory, a dark map of the galaxy's most powerful and hidden players unfolding in his mind. This was the true power he was amassing. Not just physical strength, but information. He was building a census of every potential rival, every hidden master, every forgotten horror. He was going to hunt them all. He released the Moff, who collapsed in a heap. "You may go," Alucard said dismissively. The Moff looked up, hope warring with terror in his eyes. You're letting me live?" "Of course," Alucard said, his smile cruel. "I need you to deliver a message to your Emperor. Tell him the hunting dog has slipped its leash. Tell him I'm no longer his weapon. I am a competing sovereign, and I am declaring war on everything. His empire, the rebellion, the Jedi, the Sith. All of it is my territory now. All of it is my prey." As the Moff's shuttle fled the system, Alucard turned his gaze to the stars. Thrawn was correct. This was no longer about service or even simple hunger. It was about art. It was about creating a masterpiece of terror that would echo through this galaxy for millennia. He had started by dismantling the Empire's specialized hunters. Now, it was time to go after the heart of the Empire's power. He had the codes. He had the locations. He had the names. It was time to hunt the Inquisitorius to extinction. The Fortress Inquisitorius on the moon of Nur was not merely a base. It was a statement. A brutalist spike of black durasteel driven into the heart of a watery world. It served as a reminder that the Empire's reach was absolute and its vengeance eternal. Here, the tools of the Jedi Purge were honed, and the screams of captured Force sensitives were drowned beneath the roar of the surrounding ocean. Tonight, the ocean was not the only thing roaring. Alarms that had not sounded since its construction blared through the stark corridors. The internal comms were a cacophony of panic. "Multiple breaches on sub-level 5. We've lost contact with the 7th Sisters unit. It's in the archives. It's tearing through the databanks. The structural integrity field is failing in the West Spire. Something is tearing the building apart from the inside." The fifth brother stood in the central command center. His yellow eyes narrowed as he watched the tactical hologram. Blinking red icons representing security failures spread through the fortress like a virus. "Seal the inner sanctum," he barked. "Activate all purge troopers. Nothing gets through to the holocron vaults." "It's not trying to get through, sir," a trembling technician said. It's systematically dismantling us. It started with the power relays, then the communications array. It's cutting us off, piece by piece." A new voice, smooth and laced with mockery, echoed from the ventilation shaft above. "A castle is only as strong as its foundations, and you've built yours on a foundation of fear, so brittle." Alucard dropped from the ceiling, landing silently in the center of the command center amidst a circle of raised blasters. He ignored them, his gaze fixed on the fifth brother. "You're the one in charge? How disappointing. I was hoping for the Grand Inquisitor. I've heard so much about him from the little voices in my head." He tapped his temple, where the eighth brother's essence screamed silently. "You will be destroyed, creature," the fifth brother snarled, igniting his spinning double-bladed lightsaber. "Will I?" Alucard asked. He didn't draw his guns. Instead, he raised a hand, and the shadows in the room deepened, coalescing. From the darkness, figures began to step forward. Imperial officers, stormtroopers, the Mirialan Padawan from Coruscant, the gang enforcers from level 1313. All of them pale, their eyes glowing with the same crimson light as Alucard's. His legion of consumed souls given temporary, ghastly form. "You hunt Jedi," Alucard said, as his familiars fell upon the purged troopers with silent, savage fury. "But what do you do when the dead hunt you?" Chaos erupted. The fifth brother fought with the desperate fury of a cornered animal, his lightsaber a crimson whirlwind that dismembered the spectral attackers. But for everyone he cut down, two more took its place. They were not alive, could not be killed, and their cold touch drained the warmth and will from those they grabbed. Alucard watched, a connoisseur observing a performance. He was not just killing them, he was breaking their spirit, demonstrating the utter futility of their power against his. He walked through the battle, untouched, heading for the heart of the fortress. He passed the training rooms where Inquisitors had tortured prisoners, the meditation chambers stained with dark side energy, the cells where hope went to die. He absorbed it all, the concentrated malice of this place feeding his own dark nature. He found the holocron vault. The door, a foot thick of solid durasteel, was sealed. Alucard placed his palm against it. Shadows writhed from his hand, seeping into the microscopic seams, and the metal began to corrode, flaking away like rotten wood until the door dissolved into rust and dust. Inside, on a pedestal, sat a Sith holocron, a pyramid of dark metal that pulsed with forbidden knowledge. As Alucard reached for it, a figure emerged from the shadows behind him. "That does not belong to you." The Grand Inquisitor stood there, his pale face a mask of cold rage. His lightsaber already ignited. "You have desecrated a holy place." "Holy?" Alucard laughed, picking up the holocron. It felt cold and hungry in his hand. "There is nothing holy here, only death and the fear of it. You're just a priest in a different kind of church." He turned, pocketing the artifact. "I was wondering when you'd show up, the master of this little kennel. Tell me, do you truly believe in the Sith cause? Or are you just another frightened child, hiding in the dark because the light burned you?" The Grand Inquisitor's composure cracked. "I serve the power that remade the galaxy. You serve a master who will discard you the moment you cease to be useful," Alucard corrected. He began to circle, his hands still in his pockets. "I, on the other hand, have no master. I am the promise of power that the Sith whisper about. I am the immortality Palpatine craves. I am what you pretend to be. With a roar of fury, the Grand Inquisitor attacked. He was faster, more precise, more brutal than the fifth brother. His lightsaber moves were a deadly ballet, each strike aimed to kill. Alucard finally drew his pistols, meeting the plasma blade with explosive rounds that forced the Padawan back. The battle spilled out of the vault and into the main reactor chamber, a vast cavern dominated by a pulsating energy core. The Grand Inquisitor used the environment, hurling machinery with the Force, trying to crush Alucard or knock him into the reactor pit. Alucard simply regenerated from every injury, his laughter echoing. "Yes, this is what I wanted. Show me your rage. Show me your power." He stopped deflecting and allowed the Grand Inquisitor to run him through. The lightsaber blade erupted from Alucard's back. The Padawan's eyes widened in triumph for a single, fleeting second. Then Alucard smiled, grabbed the Grand Inquisitor's wrist, and held himself impaled on the blade. "Got you," he whispered. He leaned forward and bit down on the Inquisitor's neck. It was not a quick consumption like the others. He drank slowly, deliberately, absorbing not just the blood, but the lifetime of knowledge, the bitterness of a fallen temple guard, the intricate understanding of the Force, the secrets of the Inquisitorios program. The Grand Inquisitor struggled, his strength fading, his connection to the dark side being devoured by the void that was Alucard. When it was over, Alucard let the desiccated corpse slide off his blade and tumble into the reactor core. The wound in his chest sealed shut. He stood at the edge of the pit, the Sith holocron warm in his pocket, the Grand Inquisitor's memories and power now part of his own. The last of the resistance in the fortress had been crushed by his familiars. The Fortress Inquisitorius was dead. He had not just destroyed a base. He had decapitated the Empire's primary Jedi hunting apparatus and consumed its leader. The message to Palpatine was now written in blood and ruin. The Empire's most feared hunters were now the hunted, and their hunter was just getting started. The bridge of the Executor was a tomb of silent tension. The holographic report from the smoldering ruin of the Fortress Inquisitorius hung in the air, its grim finalities sucking the sound from the room. The Inquisitorius was gone, not defeated, erased. Darth Vader stood before the viewport, his black cape a shroud against the star-dusted void. He did not need to see the report. He had felt the Grand Inquisitor's presence in the Force snuff out, a final, silent scream swallowed by an insatiable nothingness. The creature was no longer a weapon to be aimed or a problem to be contained. It was a rival power, and it was declaring war. His comlink chimed with a priority channel, the Emperor. Vader activated it. "The creature has overstepped." Palpatine's voice was a dry rasp, stripped of its usual calculated calm. There was an edge to it now, something that sounded dangerously close to fear. "It has consumed a Sith holocron from Nur. The knowledge within is not for such a beast. It is no longer hunting for sport, my master." Vader stated, "It is building an arsenal. It consumed the Grand Inquisitor. It now possesses his knowledge, his connection to the dark side, his understanding of our operations." A long silence followed, filled only by the hum of the Star Destroyer's engines and Vader's own mechanical breathing. "Then it must be unmade," Palpatine said, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "Not contained, not studied, annihilated." Thrawn's analysis was correct. We must present it with a hunt it cannot resist, and at its climax, a trap from which even its regeneration cannot save it. "The rebellion cell from Lothal," Vader said, the plan crystallizing in his mind, aligning with Thrawn's cold logic. "The Jedi, Kanan Jarrus and his Padawan. The creature spared the Jedi, choosing to inflict psychological torment over a quick kill. It has a personal interest. They are the bait. Use them, the Emperor commanded. Lure the creature to a location of our choosing, a place where the very fabric of reality can be manipulated. I will provide the means. You will provide the execution. Fail me in this, Lord Vader, and the galaxy we have built will be consumed by a darkness even I cannot control. The transmission ended. Vader turned from the viewport. The plan was set in motion. The bait would be dangled, and he would be waiting. Aboard the Ghost, the message was a ghost itself. A fragmented, encrypted burst transmission from a supposedly secure rebel source. It spoke of a discovery, a hidden world called Malachor, home to a Sith superweapon from a forgotten war. A weapon that could, in theory, sever a being's connection to the Force itself. Permanently. It's a trap, Kanan said flatly, his arms crossed. He stood in the common area, the rest of the crew gathered around. It has to be. This reeks of the Empire. But what if it's not? Ezra argued, a desperate hope in his eyes. What if it's real? Kanan, we've seen what that thing can do. The Force doesn't work on it. Blasters don't work on it. If this Force severance is real, it might be the only way to stop it. Hera looked from Kanan's resigned face to Ezra's determined one. The intel on Malachor checks out in the ancient archives. The world exists. The legends of the weapon exist. The risk is enormous, but so is the threat. Sabine nodded. It's hunting everyone, Kanan. Not just us, not just the Empire. It's tearing the whole galaxy apart. If there's a chance, even a small one, we have to take it. Kanan felt the weight of their gazes, the weight of the entire galaxy's fear. He also felt the cold, mocking presence of the vampire, a psychic scar that hadn't faded. The memory of his own powerlessness was a poison in his veins. He sighed, the fight draining out of him. We go. But we go in expecting the worst. Alucard felt the summons like a tug on a fishing line. It was not a message meant for him, but the ripples of its intent were unmistakable. He was lounging in the throne room of a Hutt cartel lord he had recently deposed, idly sifting through the Grand Inquisitor's memories. The knowledge of Malachor surfaced, dark and tantalizing. A Sith world, a weapon that could unmake what the Force had made. He laughed, the sound echoing through the opulent hall. Oh, very clever, old man, he mused to the absent Emperor. You dangle the one thing that might actually be a threat to me. A toy that breaks the connection to the energy of this world. You think that will stop me? He stood, his shadow stretching and twisting. But how can I refuse? A Sith world, steeped in ancient darkness, a weapon of ultimate negation, and my little Jedi friends walking right into the heart of it. His smile was a razor's edge. It's the perfect setting for a finale. He knew it was a trap. That was what made it irresistible. The surface of Malachor was a graveyard of black stone and darker intent. The air was cold and still, the very light from the system's red sun seeming to die before it reached the ground. The Ghost sat down near the entrance to a colossal pyramid that dominated the desolate landscape. As Kanan, Ezra, and the others moved cautiously through the ancient structure, a familiar voice slithered from the shadows. I must admit, the ambiance is perfect, Alucard said, stepping from behind a petrified statue. He looked different. His form seemed more solid, the shadows around him deeper, his crimson eyes burning with a new, chilling intelligence. The accumulated knowledge of the Grand Inquisitor and the Sith holocron. A dead world for a dead thing. The Emperor has a sense of poetry I didn't credit him for. Stay back, Kanan warned, igniting his lightsaber. Ezra followed suit, his blade a brilliant green against the gloom. "Oh, I'm not here for you. Not yet," Alucard said, his gaze fixed on the heart of the pyramid. "I'm here for the prize, the weapon that can supposedly unmake me." He began to walk past them, utterly unconcerned. "But by all means, try to stop me. The exercise will be invigorating." He led them deeper, a macabre tour guide through the Sith temple. He bypassed ancient traps and solved architectural puzzles with an instinctual ease born of stolen Sith knowledge. He was not an intruder here. He was coming home. They reached the inner chamber. In the center stood a strange, multifaceted device, the Sith weapon. And standing before it, a dark silhouette against the machine's pulsating core, was Darth Vader. "I have been waiting," Vader's voice boomed. "I know," Alucard replied, stopping a dozen meters away. "And you brought the entertainment." He gestured to Kanan and Ezra. "But this isn't their fight anymore. This was always about you and me, Lord Vader. The monster in the machine versus the monster in the man. Let's see which darkness is stronger." Vader ignited his lightsaber. "There is no strength that can save you now." Alucard's form began to dissolve, not into a swarm of bats, but into a torrent of shrieking crimson energy, the condensed essence of every soul he had ever consumed. "You're wrong," 1,000 voices spoke as one. "I'm not here to be saved. I'm here to be complete." The two forces of darkness charged, and the final battle on Malachor began. The chamber on Malachor became a crucible of annihilation. Vader was a maelstrom of controlled fury, his lightsaber a crimson arc of pure death, his command of the Force unleashing torrents of black stone and dark energy. But Alucard was no longer a physical entity to be cut or crushed. He was a storm of screaming souls, a river of blood and memory given form. He flowed around Vader's attacks, the lightsaber passing through his spectral mass to carve molten gashes in the walls and floor, doing no lasting harm. "You cannot win this way, creature," Vader boomed, summoning a barrage of shattered pillars and hurling them with telekinetic might. "I'm not trying to win." The multi-voiced chorus of Alucard thundered back, the spectral form coalescing for a moment to catch the debris and hurl it back with equal force. "I'm trying to understand. I have consumed Jedi. I have consumed Sith. I have consumed your Inquisitors. But you, Vader, you are something unique. A man who fell so far he became a symbol. Let me taste it. Let me have that glorious, tragic fall." The vampire's essence slammed into Vader, not as a physical blow, but as an invasive presence. Vader felt a cold unlike any he had ever known seep through his armor, through his cybernetics, into the ravaged flesh beneath. It was not an attack on his body, but on his soul. Flashes of a life he had buried erupted in his mind. Padme's smile, Obi-Wan's betrayal, the fire of Mustafar, the crushing weight of the suit. "Get out of my mind," Vader roared, unleashing a wave of force lightning that filled the chamber. The crimson energy arced through Alucard's spectral form, causing it to flicker and scream with a million voices in agony. For a moment, it seemed to work. The invasive presence recoiled. But when the lightning ceased, Alucard reformed, his laughter now tinged with the echoes of Vader's own pain. There it is, the fear, the self-loathing. It's magnificent. You wear that armor not to contain your power, but to contain your shame. While the two titans clashed, Kanan and Ezra saw their chance. The Sith weapon, the true target, stood unguarded. "The console!" Kanan yelled over the din. "We have to activate it." They rushed to the ancient control panel, its surfaces covered in runes that made Ezra's head swim. "I don't know how to work this," he cried. "The Force will guide us," Kanan said, placing his hands on the cold metal, reaching out with his senses. "It has to." Alucard, sensing their intent, broke away from Vader. "Oh, no, you don't. That toy is mine." A tendril of his essence shot toward them. Vader, seeing his enemy distracted, acted. He did not attack Alucard. Instead, he reached out with the Force and seized Kanan Jarrus. "No!" Ezra screamed as Vader lifted Kanan into the air, a telekinetic grip crushing the Jedi. "The weapon, boy," Vader commanded, his voice cold. "Activate it now, or he dies." It was the perfect trap. The Empire got what it wanted regardless. Either the rebels would activate the weapon and destroy the vampire, or Vader would eliminate a Jedi and the creature would remain the Empire's problem. Tears streamed down Ezra's face as his hands flew over the console, guided by desperation and the faint, dying whispers of the light side in this place of ultimate darkness. "I'm sorry." "Kanan!" The weapon hummed to life, a low, dissonant chord that vibrated through the very stone of Malachor. A beam of pure, nullifying energy erupted from its core, not of light or dark, but of absolute negation. It struck Alucard's swirling form. The million screams became one, unified in a shriek of true, unprecedented agony. The spectral energy that was Alucard began to unravel, the bonds holding his legion of souls together dissolving under the weapon's influence. The stolen essences, the Inquisitors, the soldiers, the Jedi, the countless others, began to tear free, streaming away into the ether like smoke. "No!" Alucard's true voice, his own, roared in fury and disbelief. He was being unmade not by death, but by dissolution. His power, his very existence, was built on the foundation of consumed lives. The weapon was destroying that foundation. Vader watched, his satisfaction warring with his own discomfort as the nullifying energy washed over him, momentarily deadening his connection to the Force. He dropped Kanan, who fell to the floor, gasping. The beam intensified. Alucard's form collapsed inward, the river of blood and souls evaporating until only the man in the red coat remained, on his knees. His glasses were gone. His crimson eyes were wide, not with pain, but with a shocking, profound realization. He looked at his hands, then at Vader, and a strange, peaceful smile touched his lips. "So this is it," Alucard said, his voice barely a whisper, yet carrying through the chamber. "Not a true death, but a release. For 500 years, I have carried them all. Every scream, every life, every sin." He looked at the fading spirits of his victims swirling around him. "I am empty." The beam cut out. The weapon, ancient and overstressed, crumbled into dust. Alucard remained kneeling. He was still there, still solid, but the overwhelming aura of predatory menace was gone. The void in the Force that had surrounded him had vanished. He was just a man, an impossibly ancient, impossibly tired man. He looked at Vader, then at the recovering Kanan and the horrified Ezra. "You didn't kill me," he said to Vader. "You freed me." He began to laugh, a soft, broken sound. All that power, all that hunger. And in the end, the thing I feared most was silence. He pushed himself to his feet, his movements slow, human. He looked at the Jedi. "You have your galaxy back. Try not to make such a mess of it this time." Then he turned and walked away into the shadows of the dead temple, leaving the Sith, the Jedi, and the rebel alone in the silence. The no-life king was gone. What remained was a mystery. The legend of the Red Death faded into rumor, then into myth. The Empire, reeling from the loss of the Inquisitorius, claimed a great victory, though the details were buried in classified files. The rebellion, armed with the terrifying knowledge that such entities existed, watched the shadows with a new kind of fear. Alucard did not die on Malachor. Stripped of his legion of souls, his connection to the overwhelming power that had defined him for centuries was severed. He was rendered mortal, finite. For a being who had known only endless hunger and endless existence, it was the ultimate punishment and the ultimate gift. He became a wanderer, a ghost in a different sense. Moving through the galaxy he had once sought to devour, no longer a predator, but a permanent, penitent witness to the consequences of absolute power. The galaxy had faced a monster from beyond its understanding and, through a confluence of Sith cunning and Jedi desperation, had not been consumed. But it had been forever changed, reminded that the darkness between stars could hold terrors far older than the conflict between light and dark. The Force had weathered an anomaly, and in the resulting quiet, the war between Empire and Rebellion continued, its participants unaware that the true horror had not been destruction, but the revelation of what true, immortal power could become.